She has always been extremely sensitive to interference in her personal life, particularly when it came to her father, John Leo. John was a highly successful businessman, accustomed to maintaining control over every aspect of his life. However, while managing his staff was one thing, trying to dictate his daughter's every move was an entirely different matter. Eleanor, a strong-willed child, had lost her mother when she was just 7 years old, and as a result, most of her childhood memories revolved around her father. John Leo's upbringing was rather unique, focused primarily on providing comfort and luxury for his only daughter. The nannies and tutors performed their duties flawlessly, and Eleanor's graduation from one of the country's top universities was a testament to their success. As time passed, Eleanor earned her degree in economics, and one might have expected John Leo to ease up and trust that his daughter would lead a successful life. However, quite the opposite occurred. Realizing that he wasn't getting any younger, the businessman began contemplating marrying off his daughter to someone he could eventually entrust with his business. A woman's role is to manage the home and the children, while it's a man's duty to handle the business, Mr. John insisted, seemingly oblivious to his daughter's economics degree. Eleanor was well aware of her father's demanding nature and did her best to avoid confrontations. However, when John Leo informed her that he had found a suitable partner for her, Eleanor's surprise was beyond measure. "But Dad, it's my life, can't you see that? I can't just do everything you want all the time. You may have forgotten, but I'm an adult, and I certainly have the right to decide whom I marry," Eleanor protested indignantly. Little did she know the deep impact her response would have on her father. "I didn't bring this up without reason," Mr. John retorted. "Gabriel Young would make an excellent match for you. His parents are wealthy individuals with assets worth 7 figures, and they have connections even in Congress." Eleanor was utterly shocked. She had known Gabriel for a long time, and she couldn't say anything particularly positive or negative about him. Gabriel, with wealthy parents, had never truly grasped the value of hard work or money, living a carefree life and spending his family's fortune without a second thought. Nevertheless, Eleanor felt it was not her place to judge Gabriel, as she too came from a privileged background and had never experienced financial hardship. It was precisely this similarity that John Leo decided to exploit to exert pressure on his daughter and persuade her to enter into this advantageous union. Regrettably, the man displayed little concern for Eleanor's feelings or personal preferences. To expedite the merger of their two financial empires, Mr. John engaged in a conversation with Gabriel's parents and secured their support. Now the final step remained, bringing the young couple together and publicly announcing their engagement, ensuring they had no way out. In Mr. John's mind, it was for their own good, and he genuinely believed he was securing his daughter's future. He was convinced she would appreciate his efforts later. To ensure smooth execution, the businessman reserved a table at a restaurant and invited Gabriel, his parents, as well as other guests. Mr. John had unwavering confidence in the success of his plan and believed that by cornering Eleanor, he could persuade her to change her mind. To prevent his daughter from suspecting anything, he also invited numerous friends and colleagues to the dinner. John always considered himself a skilled schemer, and he held high hopes for the upcoming evening. Eleanor, on the other hand, had no inkling of what was about to transpire. She regarded the dinner as just another social event with her father's associates, having attended similar gatherings in the past, all designed to strengthen her father's business relationships. However, when she noticed Gabriel seated at the table, a shadow of doubt crept into her heart. John Leo, an adept dinner host, exuded cheerfulness, cracking jokes that had the guests laughing and praising him for the enjoyable evening. In the midst of the dinner, he rose from his seat and requested everyone's attention, sharing a significant glance with Gabriel's father. Mr. John commenced his speech by expressing gratitude to Alfred and Penelope Young for raising an exemplary son. He went on to praise Gabriel for his dedication to his father's ideals and business. But when he began to describe how exceptional Eleanor was, she realized that her father was on the verge of announcing her engagement to Gabriel. "No, no, no, I'm not ready, not like this," raced through the young woman's mind. Eleanor found her father's decision completely unacceptable. She had always regarded herself as an independent individual, believing she had the right to shape her own personal life. Now she discovered that her father had made all the decisions for her. Without waiting for her father to conclude his speech, Eleanor rose from the table and made a hasty exit, leaving the other guests in stunned surprise. John Leo abruptly halted his speech, his gaze fixed on his daughter with seething indignation. He grasped the situation without the need for words, and Eleanor's defiance fueled his anger. The remainder of the evening was devoid of any noteworthy events, enveloped in an oppressive atmosphere. Subconsciously, the guests gathered that the businessman had summoned them for a purpose, hinting at important news. Feeling wounded, Mr. John settled the bill for dinner and was among the first to depart the restaurant, yearning to return home for a lengthy heart-to-heart conversation with Eleanor. To his astonishment, upon arriving home, he found his daughter hadn't greeted him at the door, but had locked herself in her room. "Eleanor, open the door. Can you hear me? What you did today was utterly unacceptable," the businessman exclaimed, exasperated. "Unacceptable? Really? And is forcing your daughter into marriage considered acceptable? Do I not get a say in the matter?" Eleanor responded through the door. The confrontation between the father and daughter lasted for about 10 minutes, during which both parties simmered down. Of course, John Leo was too unyielding to concede to his daughter's wishes, and Eleanor remained resolute in her intention to stand up to him. The following morning, Eleanor rose earlier than usual and swiftly left the house, purposefully avoiding any interaction with her father. Lacking time for breakfast, she decided to visit a cozy cafe renowned for its excellent coffee. Despite the early hour, the cafe was teeming with customers, primarily students seeking a quick breakfast before their classes and truckers looking for a good deal. To Eleanor's astonishment, the last available table was tucked away in the far corner of the cafe. Once she placed her order with the waitress, a young man with a slight limp approached her table. "Good morning, miss. Is this seat taken?" he inquired politely. Eleanor cast a discerning eye over the man and then nodded, allowing him to sit. The stranger had the appearance of a blue-collar worker, likely a mechanic or gas station attendant donned in a weathered jacket, worn jeans and battered sneakers. His humble attire evoked a touch of empathy from Eleanor, who couldn't help but think, not everyone can afford to dress as lavishly as Gabriel, keeping her thoughts to herself. Meanwhile, the man introduced himself as Jacob and disclosed that he worked as a tractor driver on a local farm. Eleanor reciprocated with her name, and their conversation began to flow naturally. "I'd have never guessed that this is what a real tractor driver looks like," she remarked with a smile. Jacob chuckled modestly. "Come on, what's that? I've been around farm equipment since childhood. My dad and grandfather both worked with tractors, so it runs in the family." As their conversation unfolded, Eleanor discovered that Jacob's limp was a result of a severe accident he had experienced with his father. Tragically, his father didn't survive the accident, but Jacob did, and he now resided on the family farm with his mother. Jacob's words carried a tinge of sadness, and at that moment, Eleanor couldn't help but feel compassion for this young man who had lost both his father and his good health simultaneously. Their conversation continued for about 2 hours, and they parted ways, making plans to meet again the next morning. Eleanor found herself pondering why she felt so at ease in the company of this calm, self-assured man. Jacob may not have been affluent or possessed an extravagant car, but his financial situation didn't seem to perturb him. He simply accepted his life as it was, unfazed by his difficulties. Engrossed in her talks with Jacob, Eleanor didn't even notice how their initial meeting was succeeded by a second and then a third. They had a great time together, relishing each other's company and the simple pleasures of life. Naturally, John Leo couldn't overlook the transformation in his daughter's demeanor. Eleanor had indeed changed. She appeared more affectionate and cheerful. Seeking the cause behind this change, the businessman soon discovered the budding relationship between his daughter and the tractor driver. On that very day, Eleanor had a lengthy and uncomfortable conversation with her father regarding the uncertain future she would have with Jacob. John Leo insisted that she immediately cease seeing the financially challenged tractor driver. With tears in her eyes, Eleanor protested, "Dad, can't I make my own decisions just this once? Why can't I date Jacob?" The businessman replied, "Because this relationship can't lead to anything good. What can this farmer offer you? A mountain of debt and a slew of hungry children." After tirelessly arguing and failing to change her father's mind, Eleanor reached out to Jacob and arranged to meet. She didn't mince words, quickly confiding in him about her predicament. Jacob pondered for a moment, and then his face brightened, his eyes shining with hope. "Well, if your father doesn't want to see me in his house, you should move in with me. My mom will be thrilled. I'm here for you," he assured Eleanor, taking her hand. Jacob sensed that Eleanor needed his support and assistance more than ever. Though hesitant for a brief moment, the weariness from the ongoing conflict with her father and the desire for a change of scenery propelled Eleanor to make a bold decision. Little did she know what consequences this decision would entail. Naturally, her father, John Leo, was infuriated by his daughter's choice. "I'll block all your accounts, do you hear me? I'll cancel all your credit cards. You won't receive any financial support from me," he shouted in anger as Eleanor walked away. Eleanor had reached a point where she no longer cared. After leaving for Jacob's farm, she found herself immersed in a world of tranquility and comfort she had yearned for over the years. Arlette Victoria, content with her son's choice of girlfriend, enveloped Eleanor with care and attention from the very moment they met. Life on the farm was far from easy, but Eleanor refrained from complaining and swiftly adapted to her new surroundings. She joined Mrs. Victoria in milking the cows during the mornings, assisted in the fields, and tended to the poultry in the afternoons. Days seemed to blur together, each resembling the one before. During this time, Eleanor grew profoundly attached to Jacob, and their decision to marry didn't come as a surprise. They held a modest wedding ceremony and embarked on their simple yet blissful family life. To provide for his wife and mother, Jacob toiled in the fields from dawn till dusk, offering continuous gratitude for their modest abundance. Meanwhile, John Leo couldn't stand being in the dark, so he engaged a private detective to gather information about his daughter. Oblivious to Eleanor's marriage, he still harbored hopes of reclaiming her and marrying her off to Gabriel. A week later, the private investigator delivered his report, leaving the wealthy man incensed. How dare she marry a lowly tractor driver, especially one with a limp? "What did you say his name was? Jacob?" the detective replied, offering the name. "Jacob Anthony, sir." A sudden pallor washed over the businessman's face, and deep wrinkles etched across his forehead. Could it be the one? But that couldn't be possible. Yet the limp, was it all just a coincidence? Without uttering another word to the detective, John Leo paid for his services and let him depart. He decided to pay his daughter a visit to uncover the truth. Needless to say, Eleanor was taken aback to see her father's luxurious Bentley at the farm gate. Upon exiting the car, he met his daughter's gaze, and Eleanor invited him inside. She couldn't hide the fact that she had been anticipating this visit for a while. Much to her surprise, her father refrained from initiating a confrontation. Instead, he politely greeted Arlette Victoria before approaching Jacob. Enduring the piercing scrutiny of the businessman, the young tractor driver extended his hand to John, who smiled and shook his son-in-law's hand with a touch of reluctance. As they sat at the kitchen table, the businessman finally broached the main question, his gaze cast downward in embarrassment. "Mr. John," he began hesitantly, "I would like to ask how you injured your leg." Jacob looked at the guest in surprise and then composed himself, saying, "It was a car accident, sir. My father and I were out fishing on that fateful morning, and the heavy fog made it challenging to see the road clearly. That's probably why my father couldn't immediately spot the car coming from the opposite lane. He couldn't avoid the collision. Unfortunately, my father passed away before the paramedics arrived, and I ended up with this injury. John Leo's complexion grew even paler, his emotions uncontainable. He began to sob softly, and overwhelmed by his feelings, he knelt in front of Jacob. He implored, "Forgive me, son. That day I was in the passenger seat of the car that collided with yours. You must believe me when I say there was nothing I could do. Everything happened so rapidly. The driver responsible for the crash passed away from cancer a long time ago. I've carried the guilt of not being able to prevent the accident all this time." Eleanor was stunned by her father's confession, as she had never seen him so shaken and uncomfortable. To Jacob's credit, he didn't assign blame to Mr. John for the accident. The young tractor driver understood that it was not the businessman's fault that he had been in that car during the accident. Jacob embraced his father-in-law, patting him on the shoulder and reassuring him that he held no grudge. A fresh start awaited the family, free from secrets, manipulation, or overbearing control. Eleanor soon revealed that she was 2 months pregnant at the time of their reunion. This news brought great joy to the businessman, and with grievances and hardships behind them, John Leo pledged to Arlette Victoria that he would do everything in his power to ensure the young couple and their children would always find happiness.